This is the Accidental Safety Pro, brought to you by Vivid Learning Systems and the Health and Safety Institute, episode number 9. My name is Jill James, Vivid's Chief Safety Officer, and today I'm joined by Carolina, who is Senior Assistant to the Director of Safety and Security in the digital animation and production industry in California, specifically Pixar Animation Studios. Carolina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jill. Looking forward to it.
This is so fun to have you here today, and we think about, the digital animation and production industry, specifically Pixar, and maybe everyone who's listening is thinking, safety in that industry? Like, what does that even mean? All I can think of right now are Buzz and Woody, And so maybe before we get into your story about how you accidentally became a safety professional, let's maybe paint a picture for our audience of what the industry looks like by way of just like your physical location. I've been there, I've been on your campus, but maybe kind of walk our audience through where your employees work and sort of what sort of hazards they have.
Sure, absolutely. We are a studio of about 1,400 employees. Within our campus, we actually have a cafe, so you have the safety component there. Mm-hmm. We actually also have diesel fuel because we have generators that run in case of an emergency. And so there you have another component of it. We actually also have, animators that use sculpting and all of that. And we have classes here where people can come and paint and just have their creativity. So we have solvents, we have all that. And then we have janitorial staff that we contract out who also have chemicals around and all that. We also have officers here on campus, and we do a lot of training with them, safety training as well, on how to deal with, everyday walking or lifting. We do help and support our facilities department with our engineers who deal with the diesel fuels, like I've said before, and all of that. We also have a pool, and those are chemicals that we deal with. We have forklifts, so it's a combination of a lot. We're a busy studio, moving offices back and forth with our facilities, so there's training there for them as well.
Yeah, and multiple buildings.
Multiple buildings, yes.
Yeah. And even confined spaces exist in your industry.
We actually do. There's 5 of them on campus, believe it or not.
Right. It's a beautiful campus. And yes, you do get to see Buzz and Woody and other characters as well as you move about the campus. But more importantly, is the safety of all of those employees who are there. And that's a lot of employees on a campus. And I always think about campuses as like little cities, essentially having many of the same types of hazards that exist in small towns and small cities. You kind of have a little bit of everything. So it becomes a really big job for safety professionals.
It does. And I think the greatest part of it here is that it's a little bit enclosed. So like you said, it's our own little city within a city.
So thank you for the description of, painting the picture of what your beautiful campus looks like. I've been there myself, and it's really beautiful and fun to, walk around. And yes, if anyone's listening, who's listening rather, wonders if there are like big statues of like Buzz and Woody. Yes, there are. And I remember seeing all of your Oscars in an area where employees have their breaks and things, which is pretty cool to be able to see that on your beautiful campus. But Carolina, starting in safety, and this podcast is all about how people become accidental safety pros. So I'm interested to hear your journey on how you got to where you are in your career so far, and maybe I know you kind of have an interesting start onto how you learned about all kinds of things mechanical, maybe starting back when you were a kid. So would you mind bringing us up to speed? Kind of what did your early life look like that kind of set the groundwork for this kind of career?
And I remember going through many different schools within the city, and then we established our life in San Bruno. Prior to that, though, my dad always worked on cars, and I'm the oldest of three. So instead of my brother, who's the baby, helping him out with passing out the tools and stuff like that, I was the one sitting there while he was fixing the car, handing him the tools. And that's how I started learning a lot about the mechanical component. Then in high school, I decided that I did not want to do like home ec and all of that. I actually wanted to take auto shop because I thought it would be fun and different. So I did, and I was probably one of the few females in auto shop, but I loved it. It was super cool. Then I could relate it to helping my dad out with the car and everything. So auto shop was it, and that's where the mechanical component started kicking in. And I needed a job, right? So I'm like, I finished high school. My dad bought me a 1972 Camaro, which was my favorite car of all times.
Wow, right?
Yeah.
That sounds
And
pretty fun.
right, no AC, rolling down the windows. But my dad taught me how to maintain it, how to check my oil. He always wanted to have me be independent in case I ever got stranded somewhere. I knew how to change a tire or try to assess what's going on with the car. And with auto shop, I learned all that because at that time, the vehicles were simple. There wasn't all this electronical stuff that vehicles currently have. So that was cool. So then I'm all like, I need a job. And then I tried to be a server at this senior home. And I remember it was like, man, this is hard work. And I will never forget, but I accidentally spilled ketchup on one of the visitors who was wearing a white shirt. And I felt so bad. I'm all like, yeah, this isn't me. I need to get out of this field. So I started looking, and I remember Jiffy Lube, the oil changer place, was looking for someone work the register. And I'm all like, you know what? That sounds like a cool, easy job. So I applied, and I was working the front. But I was really intrigued by the pit. I'm all like, okay, what's going on in the pit? And of course, the person that's working the pit, they're full of oil, they're dirty. And I'm all like, that is super cool. I want to work the pit.
Won't matter if you spill ketchup there.
Yeah, exactly. So, at that time, the owner was like, no, girls should not be working in the pit. I'm all like, why not? It's changing oil. That's not difficult. But of course, I was hired to work the front or the register, so that didn't happen. But I always asked questions. It got me a chance to actually go into the pit and look at things. So that was really cool. And then from there, I was like, okay, what am I going to do with life? And I thought I was going to become an airplane mechanic. So again, we go back to this
Back to mechanical, yeah.
back to mechanical. And I remember, I told my parents, they're like, okay, you're going to school, you don't have to work. I'm all like, perfect. And I was I had to take this electronic class, and I was all excited. I walk in, I'm the only female, and we're ready to build our first ohm meter. I was like, yes, this is
wow.
super cool.
Cool.
So I put my own meter together, it works and everything. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to love this class. And the next week, because it was only once a week, I went back in, and now we started talking mathematical, how to trace from the beginning to end the electrical current. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is not working hands-on with an airplane. Why do I need to know about electronical component, which I am like, it was like a foreign language.
And you'd already done that.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I don't think this is for me. And, and I'm like, I'm just going to take general ed. My parents were super supportive as long as I kept going to school or trying to have a plan, and I started taking my general ed. I became friends with this guy at school, and he was actually he was taking the fire classes because he wanted to be a firefighter. So he's like, you know what? You should actually see if you want to become a firefighter. Why don't you just come to my class one day and see what it's like?
Excellent.
I'm like, you know what? Why not? So I did, and I fell in love. um, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. I knew I had it in me to always help for some reason. And, it seemed like a very rewarding career. Plus, of course, there's not too many females. So I was like, this is a great challenge for me. And I think I can totally do it. And I fell in love. And, I finished my fire classes and the fire academy. And it was great. I became certified as an EMT, so we had that medical component in there
Wonderful.
too. And I did that, and I tried to apply, but this was like in the mid '90s where it was difficult. I mean, you had
Hard to get
like
a job.
yes, you had about 5,000 applicants to hiring that a certain city was doing. That's how demanding it was.
Right.
So, meanwhile, I was like, what am I going to do? I still need to work, figure that out. And I had a friend that worked for the city of Menlo Park and asked, hey, my aunt is looking for rec leaders for the summer. Do you want to work it? I'm all like, yeah, I like kids. Why not? It paid good for the summer while I was trying to become a firefighter. And so that found me, actually, that job. And fell in love with working with kids. It was nice and rewarding. Safety came into play with that because we had to make sure that, we had a safety plan for evacuations, carry our first aid kits and all of that. So I was exposed to that a little bit at the time. And, the director asked me to stay on, the rec director asked me to stay on, and I did because I still was looking for a job. And from there, I stayed with the city of Menlo Park and I worked with kids. I realized that the fire field was going to be definitely hard to get into,
A little
but
bit
it
of a
was
wait.
a little bit of a wait. But I fell in love with working with kids. And I realized, yes, I can't be a firefighter anymore, but this is still rewarding. And I did that. So I stayed with the city for many years and I worked my way up, ran an after school program and summer camps, and that was a lot of fun. And again, you had to do fire drills, you had to make sure that, everything was safe for the kids because we had kinder through eighth grade, I believe. And, safety was in there too,
And you were using your EMT skills occasionally, I bet, as well.
Yes. So we all had to get CPR and first aid certified and all that good stuff. So, it was just really fun and intriguing, but I needed a change. And the police department was hiring an admin assistant for the commander. So I applied and I got the job and I worked for the police department for almost 10 years there. And within that, I ended up my actually commander at the time. She's one of the few female commanders within that area. And her background was emergency management. And that's where I got into it even more. She was not only my boss, but my mentor. And because of her, I really fell in love with the emergency management component, of, fire drills, making sure we are all prepared, training our city staff and all of that. So I did that and I fell in love with it. And I was loving what I was doing. So after that, a years back, like maybe 2 years, 3 years ago or so, I was asked to work for HR, our human resource department needed help. So I said, of course,
Still within the city.
within the city, yeah. And I said, sure, why not? And I helped them out. And that's where I learned, more of the safety component because we had someone from an outside agency come in and do all of our safety checks within. So we had public works, we had, of course, we had the police department, we had childcare centers within, we had the rec department, which had pool, we had a few pools there. We had classes running in and out, and so
Multiple
it was
work exposures.
multiples. Yeah. And I always remember seeing the gentleman that would come out and do inspections and tell us, "Hey, you're out of compliance here." And I'm like, "Gosh, okay, this is kind of cool." And then I got involved with helping out with workers' comp, so that was fun, and it was a great exposure to that. So then I had to help set up safety meetings and stuff like that, but I wasn't fully involved. But I was a little bit exposed to that. And, before you know it, there was an opportunity that came, and I heard Pixar was hiring, and, they needed a senior assistant in the security realm. And I'm like,
Mhm.
you know what? This is kind of different and cool. I think I've done everything I needed to do. I was very grateful in my career path with the city and the police department, but I
Mhm.
wanted more. I
Mhm.
wanted to be enriched even more so.
Mhm.
So I decided to go ahead and update my resume and,
Mhm.
put in. But what was intriguing was the fact that it was safety and security, which was really
Mhm.
interesting
Mhm.
component. And
And
then
you had that strong, basically had built a really strong security background, right?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Mhm.
I knew my transition was going to be easy, but at the same time, I figured I was going to not only learn private security, but I was also going to learn something about safety, which I didn't know
Mhm.
what that looked like at that time. So
You
I
had a
did a
little bit
little
of exposure.
right.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I looked at what, because the manager at the time was environmental health, right? And safety manager. I'm like, what the heck is that? So, of
Mhm.
course, I'm Googling it because I need to be prepared because he's on my panel and I want to make sure, what his job was.
Can
And
speak to it. Mhm.
yes, as I started learning about it, I'm like, this is cool. I like it. It had that job had a component of, safety, which is emergency management as well, but it had a little bit more like training, which I helped assist with training components within the city. So it was really cool. I'm like, okay, this is cool. And
Mhm.
I ended up getting the job. So,
Mhm.
I was excited. I didn't realize how lucky I was that I actually was working for Pixar because it was very hard. It's hard to get into.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah, I
was
can
like, okay,
imagine.
yeah. I'm like, wow, I'm super honored. So I built a great relationship. With the environmental health and safety manager. I learned so much from him. He was amazing. And I kept asking him questions. I'm like, I want to learn your job. What does it mean? What are you doing?
Mhm.
And he did. He was really a great teacher in a sense and mentor. And I said, maybe one day I might want to, do what you do. Because I knew I didn't want to stay just as a senior assistant. Not like there's nothing wrong with it, but just
Mhm.
seeing like this whole other component in the world. And, protecting our employees. I thought
Please.
that was
Mhm.
awesome. The fact
Mhm.
that, the training is so essential to make sure that they don't get hurt on the job to prevent,
Mhm.
it's like this whole thing about preventable. And I was like, this is great. So that's how I started even falling more into it and, learning about OSHA regulations and all of that. And then he ended up leaving and went on a whole new venture for himself. So then he suggested things that I should take on to our supervisor at the time when it
Mhm.
came to safety. And that's how I was given the safety component. So that was my safety hat. I was not only the senior assistant to the director, but now I'm doing the safety component too
Wow.
and fell in love. And, he
Mhm.
had great resources like yourself, with Vivid Training and all of that. And I'm all
Mhm.
like, I'm going to reach out because I don't know. Where am I going? The fact that the foundation was laid out was really
Mhm.
nice and
Mhm.
easy. It's just maintaining it from there on, right?
Right,
So,
right. Well, you had built a really great foundation for yourself, Carolina, with all of the work that you had been doing, in your previous job with the city and all the different departments and exposures. You really were building a great exposure list, from workers' compensation to the security piece to some of the medical management pieces and the emergency action things that you were doing. You were really gearing yourself up to step into this role. And so I think by the time you and I met, and you had accidentally came into that job, which really wasn't an accident because, I know you didn't plan your path, but look at all the great things you had done to be able to get to the role that you're in right now.
exactly.
It's been really fun to help where I can with your journey at Pixar.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the day-to-day work that that you're doing now with safety, you're not you're not different than a lot of people in the safety field, whereas there's fires that you're trying to put out every day, not literal fires, but
Mm-hmm.
safety things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
How has that transition been looking for you in terms of like how are you able to work through those fires every day and kind of what resources are you reaching out to?
Well, because we are a Disney company as well, I have my Disney partners that deal with safety and environmental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually reached out and introduced myself to them in the beginning and asked if they could help guide me and answer questions for me if I ever had any. And
Yeah.
that's how, it all started. I mean, it's like there isn't always fires that we have to put out because we have our facilities department. They're really good about, safety and believing in that. Our studio is a huge supporter of it. So just keeping up with the maintenance of, making sure everyone's up to certifications that they may need, from forklift operator to CPR and first aid to, HAZCOM and all of that. So it's just making sure that I'm continuing on the regulations, making sure we're
Mm-hmm.
still OSHA compliant. And again, these things just surface up. I mean, I was on board maybe, I want to say about 4 months in,
Mm-hmm.
and I get a call from the environmental health inspector saying, "Hey, I need to schedule a visit." And I'm all like, "Huh?
What's that? Who is that?
Who? Environmental what?"
Uh-huh.
And so, I was very open and honest, and I think that's what's helped me out is I'm not afraid to say I don't know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me come
Mm-hmm.
back. Or,
Mm-hmm.
I have no clue what you're talking about, but I can find out. And I've
Mm-hmm.
always done that throughout my life and my careers. So, of course, we had to update our hazard material business plan. And I'm all like, what? What
Mm-hmm.
is that?
What is that? Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. I have never seen it. And of course, my luck, it happened to be the 5 years that he was here to review it. And
Oh,
it
it only
just
happens
landed.
every 5 years and then you get it.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all like, crap, okay, I'll just get it together. I ended up finding it because the previous manager for environmental health, he had everything together. So it was easy, and as well as my previous director. So I've got the information and I was ready to go. And I swear to you, I was like, as we were walking through, because he's looking at everything, right? Making sure, where we had hazard materials and all of that. And then he mentioned SPCC. I'm all like, what the
What's
hell
that?
is that?
Uh-huh.
And he's all like, you
Another
do have,
acronym.
yeah, he's like, you do have your SPCC plan ready to go for me to review. I'm like, mm-hmm, I'm sure. Yeah, I was like total confident about it. I knew we had it. I just didn't know where.
Mm-hmm.
So I will never forget. I'm texting my director. I'm all like, SPCC, huh? With like a question mark. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, huh? We got to figure this out. So as we're walking, I'm Googling SPCC. What does that mean? And then I'm all like, oh my God, the spill prevention, blah, blah. I'm all like,
You know.
I think
Yeah.
I've seen this binder
Yes. Uh-huh.
somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I ended up learning a lot about the environmental health component,
Mm-hmm.
which was really awesome to learn. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with hazardous material. I had fire background, so I was
It
able
made
to
sense.
it made
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was like, this is so cool. So he was super cool and understanding when I said, hey, you're gonna have to like walk me through this whole thing, and I will make the corrections that we need to make and everything. So it worked out, and we are in compliance now. So that was something that I was like, yay, it's been
Right.
accomplished.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So many of us, when we are in our safety jobs, no matter where it is and no matter how many times we've changed work, sometimes we walk into these organizations where there's nothing with safety
Mm-hmm.
and nothing's been done and we're creating things from the ground up. And other times we're walking into someone else's work,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have the benefit of having had like a tour essentially of what that work was to be able to step into it, which is, what your situation was.
Right.
There was a foundation, but you didn't really know where to unearth it.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right.
it wasn't presented to you in a way, but you've managed to figure it out. You were mentioning before the resources that you've built, and you've reached out to Disney, but you've also reached out to other organizations and other governmental bodies as you're trying to educate yourself and
Mm-hmm.
and continually training yourself. One of our other podcast guests, Dr. Todd Lusheen, said in a session that we did together that your net worth is your net work. And
Hmm.
that really stuck with me. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking how you've been building your network of people to reach out to
Mm-hmm.
continue educating yourself. And you've not been afraid to reach out to other governmental regulatory bodies. Rather, California has a lot of regulations, sometimes different than the rest of the country, oftentimes leading the rest of the country. But maybe could you share, Carolina, how you've reached out to some of those other governmental bodies? Because I think a lot of people have a fear of doing that, but you've had
Mm-hmm.
success.
I have, I knew that CAL-OSHA is different than Fed-OSHA. So I decided to just Google CAL-OSHA, and Google has been like a friend of mine. And
Hmm.
it looks like CAL-OSHA offers amazing free training
Hmm.
for, new people getting into the field of, all of that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start taking like the original, like the beginning classes of, okay, what is environmental? What are OSHA requirements in
Hmm.
California? And with the support of my director, which I'm blessed to have, I've been going to these trainings because there's so many resources out there. It's just looking for them. And
Yeah.
then when you go to these classes, you're dealing with, of course, people that they're running other type of different businesses, but at the end of the day, I realize that it's what's best in the safety of the workers. And
Hmm.
that's the main goal. So, that has been a huge, huge help. Also, reaching out to you as far as what kind of, which background what do I need a certificate? What? And, taking OSHA 10 has really helped to open
Hmm.
up my eyes. And then I can relate. I love the fact that I'm a hands on person already. So knowing that what I'm doing now makes sense when I'm taking my OSHA 10. It's like I can
Hmm.
relate what I'm learning in the classroom per se versus what I'm actually doing
Hmm.
hands on. And that's been essential. You guys have been an awesome resource. And, there's just so much out there. And I'm not afraid to call our environmental health inspector and say, hey, you know, did I do this right? Is this okay?
Right.
And there's nothing but so much help out there. And I asked him, do I need to be certified, to be like have environmental health under me? He's like, no, how you got into it is basically how we've all gotten into it.
That's affirming. Wonderful.
Yes,
Hmm.
exactly. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's just so important for anyone starting out in safety, particularly to not be afraid to reach out to those regulatory bodies. I think
Mm-hmm.
people fear it because they think, well, now we're going to get inspected. Somebody's going to
Mm-hmm.
come looking around because now I've maybe admitted I don't know as much as I should, and that's really an urban myth. I mean, governmental regulatory bodies have to have probable cause to come and do inspections, and asking for help is not one of those reasons. So, for anyone listening, I
Correct.
encourage you to, follow along with follow follow Carolina's advice and reach out and help teach yourself. I think that's great. I know one of the other things that you've worked on since you've been with Pixar is really building relationships internally with some of particularly your department heads. Can you maybe
Hmm.
talk about how you've been doing that to be able to advance the work that you've been doing with
Yeah.
workplace safety?
Absolutely. I think you said it in one of your podcasts that you did where you have to build a great relationship with those that are going to help you succeed in safety. And to go in there as being a regulatory, I'm telling you this is what has to be done, so we're doing it. It's building a trust with them, and I
Mm-hmm.
think just since I've been here and my work ethics has already started building that trust since I've been here, and I'm almost 2 years on,
Mm-hmm.
that they trust me enough to know, okay, if we're doing this, there's a reason behind why we're doing it. And again, super supportive. Safety always comes first in our studio. So I have to say, I'm really lucky to have that type of relationship. And my director also has a great relationship with management and all of that. So it helps. It's a team effort, and they realize that, and and it's awesome. I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
really lucky to that because I know that it's not always easy, that you can always get pushback, but the facility director is just awesome, wanting to protect her staff because there's engineers, there's techs, they're doing all these movement, they're working with and like I've said, just a lot of stuff, and the
Mm-hmm.
training for them is so essential that you know it's just having that dialogue and going in there, hey, we're in this together. For
Mm-hmm.
example, it's not just me. I need you because you're the expert matter on, let's say, electrical,
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you're the expert matter, not me. So let's work together on making sure that we're doing everything correct. And bringing them into the safety world behind the scenes, I think helps build that relationship.
Right, right. Do you think, Carolina, when you look back at, the early parts of when you were learning all those mechanical things and you wanted to be working in the oil changing pit and you were learning, you know, how to do car maintenance and taking care of
Mm-hmm.
all of that, and even your background in schooling in the emergency services, when you're doing your job now, are there times that you feel like you're kind of bringing back some of that experience and applying it to relate to some of the employees or some of the training, or how does that work for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it really does. It's not like I have to say, here's my resume, this is what I've done. I think it's when I've asked the questions when you ask the right questions with someone that deals with, for example, our generators, because, it's just amazing equipment, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
still
Mm-hmm.
have the same mechanical components that some cars have.
Mm-hmm.
So asking the right questions, they're like, "Oh, okay. She actually has some knowledge when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to that." So that's how I bring it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Same for me. I grew up in a blue collar family, and my dad worked in a factory. I've often applied, like would this, whatever I'm trying to train or speak about, or the way that I'm presenting, would have my dad at his factory or the people that he worked with at the time, would have they been able to understand this in a way that was, what's in it for them and relatable, or what, was I
Mhm.
presenting something in a manner that they'd look at me, like, she's got two heads. What is she talking about here?
Mhm.
and it's always been kind of my acid test throughout my career, and has been very helpful to have had that
Mhm.
background. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think too is, before I even got into the safety component, is just building relationships. It doesn't have to be as part of the safety or
Mm-hmm.
security. It's just being able to just get to know the people you work with.
Yeah.
And and I think that once you build those relationships, whatever you need as you move on and you're doing things within your career, they're willing to help
Right.
and be a team member because they're like, yeah, she's actually pretty cool and nice, and I definitely would like to help her. And I think because I build those relationships prior, with especially our facility folks, that it
Hmm.
really did make the whole transition into the safety component easier.
Right, right. Yeah, I call it trusted advising. If you build those relationships with people, you become a trusted advisor and they become your trusted advisor,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you're trying to tackle and unwind a regulation that's applicable to someone's specific job tasks, you're able to get with
Mm-hmm.
them and say, okay, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm reading, this is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Tell me about how this works in your day-to-day work life.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about those exposures. Let's talk about the fact I want you to go home with all of your parts and pieces
Right.
back to your family. And so together, let's figure this out. And
Mm-hmm.
and
And
and then
that's
you become each other's trusted advisor.
Yes. And that's how it's been. And, it's awesome. And you see it as it comes out.
Hmm.
Like, for example, we had one of our engineers up on the roof, hearing them call it into the radio, letting us know that they're up there. It was awesome
Hmm.
because we had this conversation before. It's like, I know you guys are everywhere, but what happens when you're up on the roof? Do you let us know? They're like, well, we're usually working. I go, but could you like do it for just our own sanity? Because if we do have an earthquake, or maybe something happens, you may have a heart attack, anything, at least we'll
Hmm.
know you're up in the roof, and we can follow up and monitor you and see, and those things, or else we will never know. And I'm
Hmm.
like, because at the end of the day, we really just want to make sure that you're safe.
Hmm.
And that's all it took.
Hmm.
And they're awesome. And, they've been doing that. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
we're on the radio, we're up on the roof. We're like,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Letting people know where you are. That's so wonderful that you've been able to get people to do that. People are often working solo or alone in places, particularly in those kind of maintenance jobs, or maybe it's one or
Mm-hmm.
two people working somewhere. In the time that I was with OSHA and I investigated so many workplace deaths, nearly all of them were people working alone.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I can't think of a single one out of the 30 some deaths I investigated where there was a witness, where
Wow.
someone was there. People were always working alone. And so it was always putting together those pieces. And for any of us in the safety field, what you've instituted with having your employees let you know where they are on a big campus or in a big facility, any kind of large facility that someone's going to be in a particular area, it helps inform you whether, well, should this be a solo job? Should somebody be
Mm-hmm.
working with them? Is this really meant for more than, two people? Or when it's those one-off situations where you
Mm-hmm.
as the safety person can say, hey, what are you doing today again? Okay, I know you told me you're going
Mm-hmm.
to be here, but what's the job task? And then it
Mm-hmm.
cues you in to know, should there be some air monitoring happening? Do they have all the right gear they need? Should there be more than one person? Do we have to be thinking about confined space rescue planning, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is? That's a great relationship that you've built with your staff,
Right.
so that they're
Thank you. Well,
they're letting you know.
they're amazing, and I mean, all of them. And again, safety is a priority for them too. So I've been really lucky because it's just a bunch of great people to work with,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's not
Carolina,
just me; it's a team effort.
right, right. What has been maybe one of the more fun challenges that you've been able to tackle at Pixar and say, I didn't know how I was going to do this, but I did it. I succeeded. Something that you're particularly maybe proud of, or that was a fun professional challenge for you.
It was definitely when the environmental health inspector came on, and there were certain things we needed to fix, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I have to fix this. I took it in, it's like, of course, I'm like the one that thinks like the worst case scenario. We're going to get cited. We're going to have to pay all these fees. And, oh my
Um,
goodness, I have to do it, and I'm going to
mhm,
figure it out a way to do it. And,
mhm,
it worked out really well because I was able to, fix the corrections that were
mhm,
needed. And when I see this email coming back from the environmental health inspector saying, you have met everything, you're in compliance. It felt so good. I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, I cannot believe that I actually accomplished it. But it wasn't just me accomplishing it, it was reaching out, to my resources and saying,
Mm-hmm.
hey, how do I update my hazard, the HM, whatever. See, again,
Mm-hmm.
acronyms, they're just
Right.
like horrible sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But the HMVP, how do I do all this? How do I fill it out? And, asking the inspector, do you have time to show me how I need to go into Coupa? And Coupa, I've never heard of Coupa in my entire life until he was
Mm-hmm.
here. So, just asking that and giving me those resources that I was able to accomplish it. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
also we have the Bloom Energy system here on campus. And because CAL-OSHA is a little bit more stringent than Fed-OSHA,
Mm-hmm.
they actually had copper in one of their chargers or something, but copper is considered a hazard material in California. Didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So, they did. Of course, that's what they do. And speaking with whoever deals with all of these
Mm-hmm.
HMVPs,
Mm-hmm.
we built a great relationship. I connected with him. He's like, I do these all the time. Let me help you. Here's how you have to go through it. And then I was able to do it on my own.
That's a great success story, and it's the work ethic that every employer wants. The how you're digging into these things and figuring it out, and you're talking about safety. But Carolina, you have learned a lot about environmental as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is often another avenue that safety people end up having under their purview as well. So many of us are self-taught in the environmental, and unless of course you went to college for that and maybe know a little bit more about it, but it's often a part of the safety practice that those of us who accidentally got into it didn't know we were going to have to get so dangerously knowledgeable or
Mm-hmm.
very
I know.
knowledgeable in that. um, I, I uh, I was remembering a story that you had told me about when filming was taking place on one of
Mm.
Pixar's latest. I think maybe was it Coco. I'm not exactly sure. And you needed to do something with set safety, and this was
Yes.
also a first time adventure for you with set safety. So do you want to talk about like how did you
Sure.
approach that one?
Well, apparently we have a motion caption studio here on
Mm-hmm.
campus, and someone said, "Oh yeah, we're going to be doing some filming in the mocap." I'm all like, "Mocap? Huh?
Mm-hmm.
What the heck is that?" And then I was educated by it. I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool." But this is where I learned about, say having a safety person on set.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all like, oh, shoot, we have to have a safety talk. They need to know about things. And then I started putting two and two together. Now, Fast and the Furious is one of my favorite movies in the world. And there was so many things in there. And then it just hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, there must have been a safety person on
Right.
set
Exactly.
to make sure that everyone's lifting the ladders correctly, making sure they're not too close to the fire, whatever, wearing fire retardant. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it was like an epiphany. It just like my mind just blew up, and I was like, this is craziness,
Mm-hmm.
but exciting at the same time, not
Mm-hmm.
realizing that also that's part of safety,
Right. Right.
dealing. And then I reached out to you and I said, oh my goodness, how do we get a safety person out there? What do we do? And again, of course, it's having that confidence. And I think sometimes I question it,
Mm-hmm.
could I do
Mm-hmm.
it? But wait, I actually do, because it's just all about how to lift things correctly,
Mm-hmm.
making
Mm-hmm.
sure we have enough fire extinguishers in case, teaching people that are working on the sets where our fire extinguishers are. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, wait, this is all making sense to me
Yeah,
now.
it's hazard recognition skills no matter where
Hmm.
you are, whether you're
No
on a motion
matter.
capture set or you're in a power plant or you're in
Hmm.
your cafeteria. It's
Yes,
all identifying the
exactly.
hazards. Mm-hmm.
Right. So we were able to go ahead and, create we'd add another fire. I mean, we just fixed the little things where it came to the safety component. Because at the end of the day, if you're looking at a set and you see any trip hazards, you correct them, or and then you give them a talk about, hey, if there's a fire alarm, here's your exit routes, things like that. So that was actually pretty cool to say
Sure.
I learned how to do that.
Right, yeah. And so for the people listening, you're wondering what motion capture is, and I'm, not an expert in this, but we have people who do motion capture for the training that we produce at Vivid Learning Systems. It's essentially people acting things out with specific electrical, it's probably not electrical, but components on their bodies where the film is able to pick it up, and maybe they're animating it later. And so they're acting things out. So if you can imagine, Carolina, you may have people that were climbing on ladders, or maybe they were standing at heights, or they were jumping off of something that would, later turn into some piece in an animated film. You're looking at those kind of hazards, and you're looking at electrical hazards with all the electrical components and cables and cords that are going to cameras and lights and all of that business, making
Right.
sure that you didn't have things were grounded properly, and you didn't have trip hazards and all of that business. Yeah.
Yes,
So
exactly. Thank you.
congratulations on figuring that out too. I think did your name end up being in the credits for that film for safety as well?
For this mocap, no, it has not been yet, but no, not at all.
It'll happen.
It takes a while.
You're still young in this part of the job, but when I go to movies now, and I'm sit around and at the end and you're watching the credits and you're reading everything, you do get to see safety and the people who have the safety jobs on those film sets. And so it's just another piece of the safety profession is really literally everywhere. That human beings are working. I'm often asked, like, Jill, who does safety apply to? It's every work environment. It's everywhere that human beings work. We all have different degrees of hazards that people are exposed to, and our work applies to all of them, which is so great and enriching, and gives us so many opportunities and places to work in our profession.
Yeah, and you actually bring it home with you too, because I've noticed that I'm like, okay, this is crazy. I'm like walking around my apartment complex and I see like this total violation. I'm all like, why are they running electricity from this place to that? I'm like, okay, wait, I'm not at work. This is my home. And of course, I went to the manager. I'm like, you need to really check because someone's using an extension cord that shouldn't be used for outdoors. And I'm all like, whoa, what the heck? It's hilarious.
I do the same. I do the same thing. I think we'd be hard pressed to find a safety professional that doesn't bring it home. It's just to what degree. But I do the same thing. I was at my CrossFit gym this morning and I noticed that an electrical cord was like hanging out of the outlet a little bit, and when they do that, it can build heat. And my eye is tracked to see that stuff, and so I'm getting a drink of water, but I see this cord and I stick it back in the outlet and tighten it up. I'm not telling anybody that I'm correcting a hazard at the gym, but you just see these things and you do it because it's how we're wired now to be able to do that.
Exactly.
Oh, that's great. So do your kids think that, Mom, what is the safety business, and does it spill into their lives as well? And are they thinking you're a weird mom like my son thinks I'm weird?
Oh, I think they always thought I was weird only because, working in a police department,
Oh, right.
I've made them aware of things. And, so I would always come home with stories so they could learn from them and things like that. So they've always thought I was weird when it came to that. I remember when my daughter started school in San Francisco, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my daughter's in downtown San Francisco, and she's going to this school that's in a building. And I'm all like, hey, do they have an emergency evacuation plan? And are you aware of it? She looked at me like, what? I said, I'm just saying, if there's an earthquake in San Francisco, do you know what you need to do? Because
Right.
there's not going to be BART. We have BART as our transportation, which is a train. I said, all
Right.
that's gone. You can't cross the bridge. That's the only way you're going to get to me. I said, does school have a plan? And she's like, not that I'm aware of. I was like, can you ask? She goes, no. What am I going to look like asking, Mom? Really? I'm like, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask. She's like, no, please don't. Don't embarrass me, Mom.
Mm-hmm. But you ask,
So
right?
I sure as heck did.
That's right. Me too. Say I've asked the same question every year school starts, and I'm walking through the building with my child trying to find, where the classrooms are and all of that stuff, and at the same time I'm asking him to notice his exits. Now, when we're
Yes.
in this, yeah, right. So you've done this too.
Oh
So
my gosh, yes.
if there's a fire, if there's a violent incident, if there's a chemical release, I live in the middle of the country, so I don't have to worry about earthquakes like you do. But we're identifying exits, and I'm talking to him about his emergency plan and where the gathering space is going to be, and all of that. And he's gotten used to it, but his eyes certainly roll. He was recently with his friends at a Panic at the Disco concert. Big giant venue they were at, and I had said to him in the morning before he left, I said, I want you to remember situational awareness when you get to that venue. And he looks at me, and he knows what those terms mean because he's
Yes.
my child. And he
Right.
says, okay, Mom, rolls his eyes. And I get a text from him right before the concert's starting. He sends me a picture of the stage, and he says, I have my merchandise. I've got my concert T-shirts. My 2 exits are identified.
I love that.
I'm like, this is my child. But,
It is so cute.
it's not that we're raising our kids to be fearful. We're raising them to be prepared.
Right.
And I think that can be sort of, people in safety, or who talk about safety, or who worked, in law enforcement, like you have. It's like, oh, if we talk about this, we're just going to drum up fear in people. But it's so not that. It's so
Right.
how to be prepared. It's so that it becomes part of your daily life, to just kind of bake this into how you walk through the world,
Absolutely.
and how you're preparing yourself to stay
Yes.
safe.
And, the incidents that happen nationwide is also another. Our kids are all about social media and
Yeah.
everything. The Las Vegas shooting. I mean, that was an eye awakening, I think, for the entire nation. And
Mm-hmm.
even for the this generation of going to concerts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Something that we've always preached to our kids, make sure you know your exit signs, do not get too front. Make sure that you're able to access, don't forget where your car is. Those things
Mm-hmm.
that you instill in them, when they
Mm-hmm.
go out and they actually see something horrific as that incident, then they relate it and they're like, well, this is what Mom was saying. Now
Yeah.
I understand why she was saying what she was
Yeah.
saying. And it's okay to have those conversations.
Yeah,
You
it
know what
is.
I do? It's so funny because my daughter goes to concerts too, but it's with a group of friends. When they're all sitting down together planning the next day, I sit there and they don't know it, but I actually give them a safety talk. I'm all like, do not go in front of the stage because you're going to if anything happens, you're not going to be able to get out. Blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, okay, great. Thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. But they don't even realize it.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense to them. I do these little, well, I guess maybe pop quizzes with the family, right? And I live in a state where the Mall of America is, giant mall.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with my mother there, maybe 2 years ago. And I said, let's just stop for a second in one of these halls. And we stood against the wall. And I said, I'd like you to find 2 exits right now that are not the way that we came in. That it's
Mm-hmm.
not the stairs, it's not the elevator. Show me 2 exits. And she starts
Mm-hmm.
looking around, and she said, oh, I see them. I see them over there, and I see them over there. And I said, right. But, when we're going through our life in these really big places, we're not necessarily noticing where those signs are, because it's not the same way that we came in. And it's not, it's not the normal traffic pattern, but they exist everywhere. We just have to tune our eyes to be able to look for those things, and then give yourself permission that if there is an emergency for any reason, that it's okay to go through those doors. It might not be the ones that people are using all the time, but they'll always lead you out. And so she's made that part of her practice, and something that I've taught my son as well. And it's part of what we put into our active shooter response training course that we offer at Vivid, is really trying to teach people that situational awareness, which we use for lots of things in our life, but it's just making it part of our practice.
Very true.
Yeah. So Carolina, I was wondering, you had said that you were a Spanish speaker when you started out, and now you're bilingual. Maybe you're trilingual by now, not sure. Do you ever get to use your language skills in your job?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely in the city that I worked for, I used it all the time. Translations too, when it came to within the police department. But here too, I've been able to use my Spanish because we have actually, we contract out our services for cleanings and all of that. And I actually get to use my Spanish when it comes to that. One day we had someone splash a little solution, I think it was detergent solution, in their eye, and I was able to, translate into Spanish because they were more comfortable speaking Spanish than English, and I was able to do that. So I love every time I have the opportunity to continue to practice my Spanish, even though now I feel like Spanish is my second language. I mean, it's like so weird. I'm like, wait, when I came to the States, Spanish was my first language. English became my second. And as I transitioned through, now I feel like English is my primary and Spanish is my secondary.
But so powerful to be able to do your job being bilingual.
Yes, it has definitely helped.
Yeah. Jealous of that. Wish I had that part.
You know what? You just need to take a year off and then just immerse yourself in a Latin. Yeah. That's all you have to do.
Oh, that's simple. Thanks. So what's it like working every day in somewhat of a famous place, Carolina?
I still can't believe I'm here. Every time I pull into our studio and seeing just the writing Pixar in the entry, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm actually working for such an incredible company. And just seeing the films, from beginning to end, it's just like awe. I'm still in awe, and I'm going to be here almost 2 years. Yeah.
How fun.
It's a lot of fun, and, it's just an amazing company. I just can't, again, this is my first private company I've ever worked in my entire life. So I'm lucky that it's Pixar.
Yeah, that's great. Carolina, as we close our time out together today, I'm wondering if you have any particular advice for other safety professionals, particularly women starting out. Anything that you'd like to share?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's hard for us to have somewhat of a command presence and have that confidence that we know what we're talking about. And I think it's doing your homework, researching it, reviewing it, asking questions, go to your resources, find a mentor that that will help you out, and just go in confidence. I think that is such a huge key, and I'm still learning that. But I think
Me
that
too.
is the hardest thing for us women to. We, of course, walk into a room and, oh my gosh, it's a female that's dealing with safety. Really? Because majority of them are men. We know that. But just to have that confidence and that command presence, like, yeah, you know what? I know what I'm talking about.
Wonderful. Carolina, thank you so much for the generosity of your time today.
Oh,
We
thank
really
you.
appreciate it. And thank you all so much for joining in and listening today. And thank you for the work that you all do to make sure your workers make it home safe every day. You can listen to all of our episodes at vividlearningsystems.com or subscribe to the podcast in the podcast player of your choosing. Or you could also find us on YouTube. If you happen to have a suggestion for a guest, including maybe if it's you, please contact me at social@vividlearningsystems.com. Until next time, thank you for listening.